Hello, everyone, and welcome to this installment of SAG-AFTRA Foundation's Conversations at Home. I'm Dave Karger from Turner Classic Movies. Before I introduce our two special guests today, I just want to remind everybody that the SAG-AFTRA Foundation is a nonprofit organization that relies entirely on donations to provide emergency assistance and free educational programs to SAG-AFTRA artists. This conversation is made possible thanks to the generosity of our supporters. Over the past year, the foundation has given nearly $7 million in COVID relief to more than 7,000 performers. If you are a SAG-AFTRA artist and you need help, please ask for it. And if you can help, please give. Information can be found in the description of this video. Thanks so much for your support. Now it is my pleasure to welcome the two lead performers from the movie Passing, Tessa Thompson and Ruth Negga. Hello, Tessa and Ruth. Great to see you both.
Hi, how are you doing?
Hi.
Really great, really great. You know, I had an interesting experience coming up with my questions to ask the two of you for this film, because for the first time ever, each and every question I thought of, I want to hear the answer from both of you. And that really speaks to the nature of your performances and the nature of this film. So for each question, I will kind of toss it to one of you, but I would love for the other to answer the question as well, to see what the answers are like, if
For
you will.
sure.
Well, both of you, in my opinion, are two of the most interesting and exciting young performers right now. You're almost exactly the same age. I'm curious to know if you two knew each other before this movie. Had you ever met, Tessa?
We had met. We had met in passing at a couple parties, sort of around. Right? We had met in like loud rooms. Always saying hello, hello. A couple times before we were going to make the movie, and then like once or twice once we knew we were going to do it.
Yeah.
Right, Ruth?
Yeah. Because there was a few years, like all in all, this movie has been sort of gestation for like, 13 years just?
Yes.
And then we weren't on it that long, but...
No. Ruth, you were on it for how long though before making it?
4 years.
Yeah. Okay. And me like 2, I guess something like that. So, yeah, it's been a long time. It's been a long time coming.
So I work for Turner Classic Movies, and there's a lot of cases in classic films, particularly in kind of films with two leads, where the actors got cast as one, and then right before shooting started, they decided to swap. So, but my guess would be that for this film, Tessa, you were always looking at the part of Irene, and Ruth, you were always looking at the part of Claire, or am I wrong?
When I got approached about it, Ruth was already attached to play Claire. So I read both the novella first in one sitting, and then read the screenplay directly after. And in both cases, I only had eyes for Irene. And the very neat thing is, because there's such incredibly rich source material, is I was even reading the novella thinking of Ruth because she was cast. So when I was, hearing these descriptions of Claire, I was trying to imagine what I thought Ruth would do with it. When I was hearing about Claire's laugh or her face, or I only saw Ruth. So it also meant that there were a period of years where I was in my preparation thinking very squarely about Ruth, which is perfect because I feel like, there's the theme song that you might think, that sort of Homeless Wonder song that plays throughout our film. And it's not at all Irene's song. It's actually Claire's. It's like she's a song that she can't get out of her head, and Ruth was that to me in terms of thinking about Claire, which is an added thing in prep that you couldn't have planned that better, but it was just remarkable to get to just think of her and be building my performance and ideas around character relative to what I imagined she might do or bring to the part.
So Ruth, is that the case for you, that you were always looking at the role of Claire?
I think when Rebecca brought the script to me, I think she just had an idea of me playing Irene, and I was super up for that if she wanted me to. But I just instinctively wanted to play Claire. I just did. I don't know why. I mean, I know why, because she's a brilliant character. But I think I've been trying to think why. And I think it's because I was so curious about her and I didn't really understand her. Because, I think it really is quite rare that you encounter characters that sort of are as complex and layered as this woman, and as sort of contradictory, and so she didn't make sense, and so I needed to find out who this woman was. And the thing is that like no one makes sense really. This is something we've been sold by movies and TV, isn't it? But actually none of us make sense. And so really I knew I was never going to like make sense of her, but I knew I wanted to go on a journey with her, and I knew I felt this sort of rush of energy when she was on the page, this kind of aliveness, this kind of, this love of life. And I got the feeling like she wanted to experience life, ups and downs, every feeling. Do you know what I mean? She wasn't frightened of living fully. And so many of us, me included, are. And I just wanted to see what it felt like to live in this kind of, not fearless, because there's a lot to be frightened of when you're lying, when you're passing as a woman of color for white. I mean, it's life-threatening if you get found out. There's a lot of people whose lives are in danger if certain people find this out. And yet she's intent on living. And I just thought that was so moving and inspiring, especially for a woman of color at that time, and actually a woman of color now, actually, actually any woman expressing desire. It's so like taboo even now, and desires to want things that are like things, for instance, or a desire to want to be more than a mother, because she's not too impressed by motherhood, and these are all kind of things that playing people gives you an opportunity to do things that you would normally never do, or to explore what makes people tick, or even yourself tick. I always feel like exploring other people, you always come back to yourself. Do you know what I mean? And so I felt like playing her gave me a lot of life, and the idea that you can have joie de vivre in the most dire of circumstances. And indeed, you need it in the most circumstances.
Yeah. It's such a singular piece of work in its tone, in its subject matter, in just the originality of these two women. Did it feel different to the two of you in the performing of it, in the filming of it, as much as it felt unique to us as an audience, Ruth?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Do you know what? I don't know, Tessa, if you feel the same way, but I think, we have the same sort of, I don't know, these two, we realized very early on, independently and together, that these two women are sort of their other halves, it's like they're just a jigsaw of two pieces and they fit. And so, I don't know, there was this kind of, I don't know, for me, the set was infused and our filming was infused. Like there was a very, I don't know, kind of unspoken energy and, I don't know, like a psychic energy. And it was these two women, because they sort of could only exist in this film with each other. Like we don't see them before they've met, only briefly, only really briefly. So they are bonded. And so that means me and Tessa were bonded. And for me, hopefully for you too, it came very naturally and organically, because I think we both have the same sort of sense of working, of like doing a lot of research and kind of absorbing these characters physically, emotionally, spiritually, and then knowing that when we're on set, you're working with all that prep that someone else has brought as well, and then you see what happens. And it was one of the most exciting sets I've been on, because Rebecca gave us that space and freedom for something unexpected and original to happen when we came together. Yeah. And indeed when the others came together. But that's what, and it had this kind of, I just remember it as this dream-like quality, even when we were filming it.
It did feel different. I also think our performances are pretty codependent, and also because just technically we shot in 4:3, so there's a kind of specificity, particularly because some of the images are static and we're all in one frame. Some things were so specific in terms of the precision of when we needed to be on which stair at what line. And Ruth and I were it felt like teamwork. It was almost felt athletic, and like we're sort of like in it together, just like, oh, okay, another one and another one. Like we didn't do that right. There's moments technically where she overtakes my shot. So it's literally just the physicality is very, very precise. In that way, it felt like different than you sort of shoot your side and you kind of movie magic it together. It felt like so much of the movie magic we're doing practically in real time together. And it's always described when it's good as a dance, but this really felt like a dance. And I think Ruth and I, thankfully, are similar in the way that we work. There's a certain, like intensity that we have to wanting to get the waltz right, but also if we step on each other's toes, we can have a laugh. There was this balance between like real immersion in it and also being able to step away from it and make sure that our scene partner, our friend is okay. And we're bringing a certain amount of levity and ease to the experience, which I'm really grateful for. I think we're lucky in the sense that it kind of feels like we had similar energies around how to exist on set together, which may have been challenging if we didn't, who knows. Something that felt really different to me too is just a sense of privacy. Like I don't know that I've done something in a similar way and felt like there were moments that felt so incredibly private. I almost couldn't believe people were going to see them. And you make these things obviously to be seen, but I remember moments of feeling actually quite horrified that anyone was going to see these private moments, these conversations, these thoughts, these feelings, and that's new, I think, and it has a lot to do with an environment, I think, of safety that Rebecca was able to create.
Speaking of Rebecca Hall, your director, who many people already know as a brilliant actor, this is obviously a very personal story and subject matter for her, being of mixed race herself. I'd just be curious to know, in addition to her wonderful work as a director and the script, was there anything that she said to you in the process of the whole development or filming of this that was particularly helpful? Any conversations that you might have had with her that kind of opened your eyes to different things or help with the performance? Tessa, I'll start with you on that.
Yeah, I think we worked. I know because she's said that, for her, the biggest job, she actually felt a tremendous amount of trepidation. All the other things, trappings of what the filmmaker has to do, like she had storyboarded the whole entire movie. It was really communication with us that she was conscientious of. I think having been an actor on the other side, you're aware of when someone gets in your way or gets in your head, or, so I think she wanted to be quite delicate about that. But something that I found really interesting was an exercise that she and I did together, where she took me through, like, almost if she were playing Irene, sort of what her process would be in real terms, in terms of, because we only had 23 days. We had very little money, which meant we had very little time on those days. We shot entirely out of sequence. So she really wanted to make sure, particularly with Irene, because in our estimation, Irene is having sort of a breakdown. We wanted to be able to chart where she is in her journey. She herself is not conscious of it, but we, I think, as the storytellers, wanted to be very conscious of how we were tracking those things and make sure that we had some sort of almost like a document that we could go back to remember sort of how we were charting this journey. And I think it's that thing that Ruth sort of hinted at, this idea of all the prep that you do, and then, you hopefully throw it away and you're responding very authentically to what exists. But it was the first time that I had done that level of prep with a filmmaker, because they really understood and have done it in real terms. I mean, I've like worked on a bio with a filmmaker, or we've talked about like, I'll do whatever the filmmaker is into. I'm like, sure, if we want to talk about what zodiac sign you think the character is, I'm like happy to engage in that with you. But it's the first time I've worked closely with an actor turned director, and we could really chart a journey together. And that I think is interesting, just because, there's a certain level, I think sometimes, particularly with television and with film, sometimes people are loath to really get into like the nuts and bolts of the work. There's this idea, they'll be like, well, we'll figure that out on the day, even if the day is only 2 hours away. And I think it felt very nice in this company of folks that have mostly come from the theater. You could like sit around the table and talk, really talk critically about the work and intentions, and really, really get into it together, which is not to say that we didn't sort of keep our own secrets, but it was also a very open dialogue in terms of how we were going to approach this work and what we wanted to do with it. And that I felt started with Rebecca.
What about you, Ruth? Same thing, your experience working with her.
Yeah. I mean, it felt truly collaborative, and it wasn't just lip service. That was very important to Rebecca. And I think, having been an actor, she really appreciates the lack of bullshit. We don't need to be plumosed or what's the word? Cushioned or cozened, or smoke blown up our arses. I mean, I'd say that shit. Yeah, no, I'm fine. I'm sure I'm fine, isn't it?
Yes.
And all that stuff, that people think they have to sort of coax a performance out of actors sometimes, which drives me mad. It's all it requires is like a genuine collaboration and trust. And I was so grateful for that. Genuine trust, support, and then trust is to make your choices, within that moment in that scene, and that's really important and lovely, because then you think, it's you feel valued. Do you know what I mean? And when you feel valued, it gives you strength and vigor to try things, and go places. And I can't underestimate how important that is. And I think how she earned our trust was being transparent about things, working with us and building our characters together, explaining, like for the technically limited like me, what was going on in a frame. It was never like, oh, you don't need to know that. It was like, and you felt like, and that speaks a lot to who Rebecca is. She has a great respect for artists in any capacity, and you could feel that on that set. Everybody, she relied on everybody on that set, and when you rely on people, and you really do rely on them truthfully, everyone comes together in a really cohesive way, and she acknowledged everybody's worth and contribution. Everybody's, and that was a really felt.
Yeah,
definitely.
Tessa, now I'm really intrigued by something you said a couple minutes ago, which is this idea of the two of you maybe holding secrets from one another, maybe to inform the performance. So collaborating with your fellow actor, but also having a secret maybe that you shared with the director, but not with your co-star. Can you give me an example of what something like that would be? And is it something that you have since shared with Ruth since wrapping, or is it something that you will like keep to the grave?
Well, Irene is a hugely, I think, secretive character. So I feel like there's a lot of secrets there. Also secrets that it's weird. I don't know how to explain it. Like in the prep, it's also this idea of like, Irene has secrets for me and I have secrets for her, if that makes sense at all. For example, like Tessa, understand that I think she's unraveling, that she's having sort of a break, a mental break. But she doesn't know that, for example, and also I allowed Rebecca to have a secret for me, which is especially around the end. As Ruth said, she was so verbose about what her process was and how she would shoot things. But when I asked her to explain to me how she would shoot the ending, she wouldn't, which I appreciated. And I swore that I would not let her know what my intentions were. It wasn't important for her to know or to micromanage what I decided about what happens at the end from Irene's perspective. So it meant as much as she knew how she wanted to shoot it, there are physical things, for example, that I hadn't talked about with her. For example, there's a lot of emphasis on hand. And I knew because where she was placing the camera and we had a conversation and I kept my hand there. But for example, I knew she was going to do a shot from the back. And there's something that I do very specifically with my hands that are behind my back, which I think a part of it was like having a sense of, yes, what I think happens for Irene physically, but also knowing that something that shook me so much about the novella and thereby Rebecca's rendering of it is that I actually left really unsure. And so understanding that if there's a way to sort of communicate that inside of physicality too, that as much as Irene might be confused about what has happened over the last couple minutes, maybe the audience could be too. And that felt like, that was both Rebecca and I allowing ourselves to have secrets from the other inside of a very open collaboration, that there were certain spaces that felt, like we didn't have to necessarily tell each other what we thought.
So since you brought this up, because the ending is so fascinating. So of course I went to the script because I needed to know, what clues am I going to find out about what's really going on here? And it's fascinating. Just the description, which says Irene reflexively swipes her arm out behind her to protect or push Claire away from one imminent danger and accidentally or purposefully towards another. And I thought, damn you, Rebecca Hall, not giving us any really clues there. So the ambiguity is not just in the performance, it's in the writing. But Ruth, you must have I doubt you're going to tell me, but you must have your own theory as to what happened.
What difference would it make, do you think, if you knew?
Well, I think I know what it is for me, and that's the most important.
Important to know.
I'd be curious to hear what you think, and I don't think there's a right answer.
We're not answering each other's questions here. I love it. We're like politicians. I'm going to be skirting this now forever. Look, I think it's important. It's important. I genuinely believe that to walk away from this film thinking, it doesn't really matter who did it. Really, it doesn't. For me, really watching, because I just came to this conclusion. I think many people have come to this conclusion that everyone is culpable. Everyone is culpable. The sad fact of it is that society wasn't ready for this woman. Not really. Because her presence, I think, exposes things about other people that they're not too comfortable with. Look at what she's done to each. She's had a physical, chemical, emotional effect on people. Look at her husband at the end. Look at them all, you know. They cannot conceive of a woman living wholly, with all, accepting all her flaws and all her foibles and not being ashamed of them, you know, especially a woman of color who has been passing and essentially undermining the status quo of the white supremacy, you know. She's very dangerous, really. And I think I left the book and I left the film thinking, it's such a shame. It's such a shame that souls like that cannot thrive in the world that we have constructed. And that's the tragedy for me about Claire, is that it's not, her being and her soul doesn't warrant punishment, but everybody else seems to think she needs to be punished. For what? For being completely and utterly herself and alive. Something we all covet, isn't it? And what do we do sometimes to things we covet? We destroy them.
Let me finish with one last question for the two of you. And obviously it sounds like Rebecca was showing you framing. And so you had an idea while filming it of what the finished product might look and feel like. But obviously you shot it you lived it in color. And you then saw the finished product in 4:3 in black and white with that cool soundtrack, everything. I'd be curious to know for each of you, Tessa, start off, what was your reaction when you saw the finished product? It must have felt different from watching the finished product of any other film that you've ever been a part of.
Do you know what? This is going to sound weird, but it didn't, because I always saw it in black and white. Also, the music, she knew that from the beginning. It was almost a third character in the film. I was listening to Homeless Wanderer obsessively while making the film. So the film feels like that block that I walk in Harlem, even though we shot that in one day. It felt like there were 23 days of that with that song, and it was Ruth Negga's face. I don't know. It feels like, sure, there were surprises. You know, the film, Rebecca wanted the film itself to feel like it's passing. And so it's almost oppressively beautiful. And I think selfishly to exist in frames like that is just like, you know, there's something really moving, I think, about seeing you exist in a frame that is just beautiful and looks like, I mean, at the risk of sounding trite, really moving pictures. You're like, every frame looks like a picture and a gorgeous vintage found image that is just really remarkable. So I felt moved by that, but it really did, while shooting it somehow. I remember, because, you know, it's very hard with paparazzi in New York. You can't get them off a set if they want to be there. And they took these photographs of us and they published them in like Us Weekly or something, or like online, and they were in color. And I remember instantly turning them in black and white in my phone and just like staring at those images of Ruth and I then like on the stoop or holding our flowers, not unlike the press stills now, you know, for the film now that it's released. I don't know, something about making it. And also because Rebecca knows so solidly what this film wanted to be. Even in prep, I imagined it in 4:3. I imagined, also we were shooting in what ended up being, even for our small crew, a relatively small space. So sometimes the experience felt claustrophobic, which is mimicked in the aspect ratio. I don't know, somehow it is the movie I imagined we were making in certain ways. I think the thing that really just blew me away was really seeing Ruth's performance and, you know, and being able to get outside more objectively, not to see Claire not as Irene, you know, to see Claire as an audience member and to see Ruth's work and everyone's work. That really blew me away. But it felt like the film we were making somehow.
How about you, Ruth? Same question.
Yeah, I mean, my memories of it are in black and white.
Yeah.
Like, I don't remember. I'm convinced we shot it in black and white. I don't remember. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Tessa's absolutely, when you watch something that beautiful and you get to be in it, I mean, it's a pretty amazing moment. And do you know, like I obviously wasn't there for when Tessa's with Andre, and when she's you know having her own journey, and I hadn't seen it, and I just thought it was such a beautifully rendered study of a woman, like you said, Tessa, like a woman who's having a breakdown, doesn't realize until it's too late. Like I, like lots of other people who I've talked to afterwards, I was holding my breath a lot, and I didn't realize, because you're seeing this unraveling, and you only realize too late with Irene. Do you know what I mean? And how that happens is really extraordinary, that Rebecca and Tessa were able to do those beats, that it's only descending on you as it descends on the character. Usually you don't have that privilege. Usually you have the knowledge and you're watching from the outside and you're going, oh, this character's, but not here. I was so sort of blindsided by this really, I mean, this performance of a woman unraveling is so delicate, and it's so not hysterical, so it bucks like your expectations, and that's why it's so powerful, because you're there at the end going, Jesus Christ, of course.
I love what fans of each other you are. And by the way, that only adds to the film. It adds to the film, and it adds to the whole experience. I could sit here and talk to you both for hours, but you have things to do. So I'm going to let you go. But I'm just going to say, on behalf of everybody at the SAG-AFTRA Foundation, Tessa, Ruth, thank you so much for taking some time to talk about this fascinating film. And I hope to see you both again very soon.
Thanks so much, Dave, and thanks everybody out there.